This is Anewz. I'm Bakhtiar Sanov, and let's go through the main headlines. The United States and Iran are reportedly close to reaching a deal aimed at ending their conflict. Russian strikes killed at least 27 people in Ukraine just days before Moscow's planned two-day ceasefire. And Israeli strikes killed at least 3 people and wounded 9 others in Gaza despite a ceasefire. The United States and Iran are once again at the center of heightened tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial global shipping lane, as diplomatic efforts, military warnings, and fresh maritime incidents raise concerns over the stability of the region.
The Donald Trump administration has announced a temporary halt to its naval operation, helping ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital route for global oil shipments. President Trump said the mission, known as Project Freedom, would be suspended for a short period after what he called strong progress in negotiations with Iran. He added the move followed a request from Pakistan, which has been acting as an intermediary. Despite the pause, U.S. restrictions targeting Iranian ports will remain in place. He also said on Tuesday that Iran's military strength has been heavily weakened and claimed Tehran should surrender, adding that it is too proud to admit it.
They should wave. They're very proud. Maybe you won't see a white flag, but essentially that's already what they are. They should wave the white flag of surrender. In hockey they say uncle, right? When are they gonna cry uncle? But and they have another expression. If this were a fight, they would stop it.
At the same time, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Washington favors a diplomatic solution, noting that the administration is aiming for a deal rather than further escalation. Meanwhile, Iran's state media reported that Tehran has introduced a new system to control ship movements through the strait. Under the plan, vessels must follow official guidance sent electronically and secure approval before entering the waterway. Iran's Revolutionary Guard warned ships to stick to designated routes, saying any deviation would be considered unsafe and could prompt a firm response. It also accused U.S. forces of carrying out actions that have disrupted maritime security and put commercial vessels at risk. As the situation remains tense in the Strait of Hormuz, fears of further disruption to shipping continuing to weigh on global energy markets and oil fluctuation prices.
Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts between the United States and Iran appear to be gaining momentum, with reports suggesting a potential breakthrough in long-running tensions. The two nations are said to be closing in on a one-page memorandum aimed at ending their war, according to a Pakistani source. The source told Reuters that two sides are getting close to a deal, confirming an earlier Axios report. "We'll close this very soon. We're getting close," the source said. The development is seen as a major step toward a wider framework for nuclear talks and the potential de-escalation of tensions in the region. Iran's Red Crescent Society says it has documented numerous cases of violations of international humanitarian law by Israel and the U.S. during their 40 days of military aggression against Iran. Our correspondent Turaj Shiralilov has more from Tehran.
The Secretary General of the Iranian Red Crescent Society, IRCS, Maysam Afshar, said it has documented the violations of international humanitarian law during the Israeli and U.S. war on Iran. He said that IRCS has sent 35 official communications to the relevant international bodies protesting to the deliberate targeting of the civilian areas as well as medical centers. Speaking at a press briefing on Wednesday, he added that the international humanitarian organizations visited Iran during the war and had field observation of the non-military areas destroyed in the air raids. The IRCS president, Pir Hossein Kolivand, also referred to the visit last week to Iran by the president of International Committee of Red Cross, ICRC, to have first-hand information of the scale of strikes on capital Tehran, which was targeted more than 500 times. Kolivand announced that Iranian and foreign law experts will meet online next week to review aspects of violations of international humanitarian law in the war. The meeting will be held as part of the Crescent Week in Iran, coinciding the World Red Cross and Red Crescent Day, which is celebrated on 8th of May every year. It was also announced that the Iranian Red Crescent Society broke many records in terms of relief operations and missions and recruiting volunteers, while 4 aid workers were killed and 61 more wounded in the war. Turad Shiralilu from Iranian Red Crescent Society for Anewz.
G7 trade ministers are meeting in Paris as renewed U.S. tariff threats and the ongoing war in Iran heighten global economic anxiety. Brussels is urging Washington to respect existing trade agreements while also warning of severe fallout if the conflict disrupts vital shipping routes.
Clearly, the preliminary data we have, I think they point to the quite big impact this closure of the Strait of Hormuz has on the global economy. Of course, what would depend is that how long this crisis would last, how long this strait would be closed. But the figures, let's say, I'm going through and I'm hearing from our partners that it could be between minus 0.2 to minus 6% at least for the European Union's GDP.
Oil prices have eased and global markets moved higher as optimism grows over possible progress in the U.S.-Iran talks. Brent crude fell to around $107 a barrel, with U.S. oil prices also declining after recent sharp hikes. In Europe, major stock markets, including those in London and Madrid, rose by more than 1%. U.S. President Donald Trump said there had been great progress toward a possible deal with Iran. China's foreign minister has met his Iranian counterpart in Beijing in their first talks since the U.S.-Israel war on Iran began. The meeting comes just days before a planned summit between Presidents Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. Our Mahnur Maktoum has more in Beijing.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Beijing on Wednesday, their first in-person meeting since the outbreak of the U.S.-Israel war on Iran in February. The visit comes just 1 week before President Trump's scheduled summit with President Xi Jinping, making the timing highly significant. Two issues dominated the agenda: maintaining the April ceasefire and reopening the Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil and gas once flowed. Washington has urged Beijing to press Iran to lift its hold on the waterway, and while China has condemned the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports, it has also grown increasingly critical of Iran's own closure of the strait. The standoff has driven the global fuel prices and raised fears of a wider economic shock. Behind the diplomacy, Iran was seeking clarity on whether Beijing might make concessions to Washington at the upcoming summit that could leave Tehran exposed. Araghchi reaffirmed the ties between the two countries would only grow stronger, but with Trump arriving in Beijing in just over a week, how Beijing navigates the relationship may shape the trajectory of the conflict itself. Mahnur Maktoum, Anewz, Beijing.
Gaza's death toll has passed 72,600 according to local health authorities. A latest strike killed 3 people, including a teenage boy.
Tensions remain high in the Middle East as Israel continues its operations in Gaza. The Palestinian death toll has now reached 72,615, according to health authorities in the territory. More than 172,000 people have been injured since the conflict between Hamas and Israel began on October the 7th, 2023. Officials say at least 3 people were killed and 9 others wounded in the past 24 hours. Among the latest incidents was an Israeli strike on a police station in Gaza City on May 5th, where a 15-year-old boy was killed and several others were injured.
He sells bread to feed his siblings. He has 15 people to feed. Nobody feels for us. If we go hungry, if we die, if we are killed, nobody feels. What did this child do to deserve being hit while selling bread?
We suddenly heard a blast. I ran outside and found the police station had been hit. I looked and saw people lying on the ground, martyrs and wounded. I started moving and putting them in the car. We came here with a martyr. When will the war stop?
Earlier the same day, other Israeli strikes killed at least 2 more Palestinians, according to local health officials. There has been no immediate comment from Israel on the incidents. Israel has intensified strikes on Gaza's police force, saying it is used by Hamas to maintain control. Violence has continued almost daily despite the ceasefire, with both sides accusing each other of violations. According to Gaza's health authorities, more than 800 Palestinians have been killed and over 2,300 injured since the truce took effect in October 2025.
Russian strikes killed at least 27 people in Ukraine just days before Moscow's planned 2-day ceasefire, raising doubts over whether the pause will hold.
Ukrainian officials say Russian attacks have killed dozens of people across multiple regions, hours before a proposed ceasefire was due to begin. The heaviest strike was reported in Zaporizhia, where authorities say aerial bombs and drones killed at least 12 people and injured around 20, damaging residential areas and sparking fires.
There was a cynical strike on facilities in the city of Zaporizhia with 4 guided aerial bombs. The enemy intentionally began attacking those locations with Shahed drones. For a very long time, emergency services and municipal services were unable to approach the location.
In Kramatorsk, officials say 5 people were killed and 12 injured, while in Dnipro, authorities reported between 3 and 4 deaths, with several others wounded. In the Poltava region, a strike on gas production facilities reportedly killed 4 people. Separately, officials in the northern Chernihiv region say a drone strike hit the city centre, injuring 3 people and setting an administrative building and nearby vehicles on fire. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has criticised the limited pause, saying it is not enough to halt attacks for only a short period. Russia has not commented on the latest Ukrainian claims. Meanwhile, Russian state media reported that a Ukrainian drone strike killed 2 people in the Chuvashia region. Ukraine has proposed an open-ended ceasefire starting at midnight, urging Russia to reciprocate. Moscow has announced a separate truce for May 8th and 9th, linked to World War II commemorations.
British police are launching a new specialist unit to strengthen security for Jewish communities in London, following a wave of anti-Semitic attacks. London's Metropolitan Police will deploy a new 100-officer protection team, including counter-terrorism specialists, to safeguard Jewish communities across the capital. The move comes after recent anti-Semitic incidents, including arson attacks on Jewish ambulances, synagogue targeting, and the stabbing of 2 men who survived. Police say around 50 arrests have been made in the past month, with 8 people charged. Italy's ceramics industry is feeling the strain of volatile energy markets as rising gas prices begin to bite into one of the country's most export-driven sectors.
Inside a factory in northern Italy, production lines continue to run smoothly. But beyond the orderly rows of ceramic tiles, global energy turmoil is creating growing uncertainty for manufacturers. The industry is concentrated in the Sassuolo district, which produces more than 80% of Italy's ceramic tiles. It relies heavily on gas-fired kilns, leaving companies highly exposed to supply disruptions and price swings. That pressure has intensified following tensions in the Strait of Hormuz due to the war in Iran, which triggered a sharp spike in gas prices.
If we consider that prices before the war were around €30 per megawatt hour, they even rose to over €60. We are now talking about 46, 47, 48 euros, representing a 50% increase in the cost of gas. Despite the fact that most of Italy's gas comes from sources outside the Gulf region, only 12 or 13% of gas comes from there. This has caused a problem of rising prices.
That surge has had a direct impact on production costs. Gas accounts for the vast majority of energy use in the sector, and even short-term price increases are quickly felt across the industry.
We can say that the Italian ceramics industry consumes around 1.2 billion euros worth of gas per year. In the first 3 months of 2026, we saw increases of around 50%. So we are talking about an extra 150 to 200 million euros in the period solely due to this increase.
The added costs come at a difficult time, with manufacturers already dealing with international trade pressures. And in a highly competitive global market, passing those costs on is not always possible. Italy's ceramics sector includes more than 120 companies and employs around 18,000 people, with most production destined for export. So far, there have been no widespread job losses, but some companies are cutting output and relying on state support schemes to manage rising expenses. Industry leaders say as options to reduce reliance on gas remain limited. For now, the sector continues to operate, but with energy costs rising and uncertainty persisting, the pressure on one of Italy's flagship industries is only building.
Chinese authorities have ordered all fireworks factories in Hunan province to suspend production following a deadly explosion. State media say at least 26 people were killed and 61 injured in a blast at a factory in the city of Liuyang. Officials say the shutdown is part of a province-wide safety review aimed at identifying risks and enforcing stricter standards. Liuyang is a major center for fireworks production, accounting for a large share of China's exports. The cause of the explosion remains unknown. New Zealand is preparing to introduce a citizenship test for migrants from 2027, adding a new requirement for applicants seeking citizenship by grant. The in-person test will include 20 multiple-choice questions in English, with applicants needing at least 15 correct answers to pass. The questions will cover areas such as human rights, voting rights, democratic principles, the structure of government and travel rules. Officials said applicants should understand the rights and duties of citizenship. SpaceX has launched a Falcon 9 rocket carrying 24 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit from California. The rocket lifted off from the Vandenberg Space Force base on Tuesday night. SpaceX says the reusable first-stage booster on its 24th flight successfully landed on a drone ship in the Pacific Ocean after separation. The Starlink program aims to expand global broadband internet coverage.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss U.S.-Iran tensions in the Gulf, where fragile calm meets the risk of renewed confrontation. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Anewz. Our top story for discussion. A fragile calm is settling over the Gulf, but the risk of renewed confrontation between the United States and Iran remains very real. Donald Trump says any return to war could achieve its objectives within weeks, while Masoud Pezeshkian insists Tehran will not bow to pressure. Despite a ceasefire announced in early April, the situation on the ground tells a more complicated story. Iran has reportedly resumed the missile and drone strikes targeting the United Arab Emirates, raising fears of a broader regional spillover. At the same time, Washington has paused its naval escort operation in the Strait of Hormuz, while keeping its broader pressure campaign intact. To unpack these developments, I'm joined by political analyst Francisco Lima, speaking to us from Lisbon. Francisco, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Francisco, does this pause in U.S. naval operations signal de-escalation, or is it merely a strategic pause?
I think it's in the interest of the United States right now to continue with this pause, with this ceasefire, and with this blockade. I mean, it's even striking to hear American officials say that that if the war were to resume, they could end it or they would reach their strategic goals in 2-3 weeks, when in fact they have been saying for the past weeks that those strategic goals have already been fulfilled in the past. And I think that even though we can have that discussion, that's an important discussion to have, the question here is, what does the US have to gain in the resurgence of an open conflict with Iran? And I think very little. The marginal gain of opening hostilities against Iran have very little to give to the United States, except, of course, if the United States were willing to use ground troops, which we have no indication in that line. So what I would say is that the United States are in a quite comfortable position right now. They're trying to strangle the Iranian economy by imposing a counter blockade on Hormuz, trying to choke Iran on its own oil by making Iran reach its maximum storage capacity of oil and therefore having to interrupt its production and extraction of oil. And what is left really for the US to do there? We could talk about regime change. Again, that would probably need troops on the ground. We could talk about taking physically removing from Iranian soil the 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. Again, that would need troops on the ground. So there is very little, I think, for the US in this conflict in the future, if they're not willing to bring American troops to the Middle East and particularly to Iranian soil.
Mr. Lima, how should we interpret Donald Trump's claim that if he decides to return to war against Iran, it will take 2 to 3 weeks to achieve its goals in the war? Is that realistic?
Again, I have my first question here, and I think the first point to analyze is, what are those goals? Because we have been hearing from them, from Pete Hegseth, from Marco Rubio, from J.D. Vance, etc., is that the American goals in this war, that the objectives of the United States have already been reached. We're talking about making sure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, destroying or severely degrading Iran's ballistic missile program, destroying Iran's navy. The US claims to have done all that until now. And therefore, this is in the minimum contradictory. Of course, that we know by analyzing coldly the situation that the US has not indeed absolutely reached these goals. And in order to do so, for example, to make sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, those 400 kilograms of enriched uranium are fundamental. That's why they have been at the center of the discussions between Iran and the US, with Pakistan mediating. And so again, I seriously don't understand how the US plans in 2 or 3 weeks to completely fulfill the goals, which they claim they have already fulfilled. I can't offer much on that, simply because I think it is contradictory, and the United States at this point is more comfortable leaving things as they are, keeping the ceasefire, than trying to escalate and begin an escalation trap that really does not bring much marginal gains to the United States.
So on the Iranian side, President Masoud Pezeshkian's rhetoric has been firm. He said that, quote, "No one can make us surrender." How much of this is domestic signaling versus actual strategic intent?
Sorry, I didn't get the end of your
So
question.
let me repeat again. On the Iranian side, President Masoud Pezeshkian's rhetoric has been firm. He said that no one can make us surrender. How much of this is domestic signaling versus actual strategic intent?
I think it's both. I think that it's very hard to get Iran to surrender. When we talk about Iran here, I'm talking about the regime fundamentally. We've seen that they have basically endured years of severe economic sanctions. The regime has endured this, possibly even hardened and strengthened their position through it. They have had a huge challenge to their, even before this war, again, brutally, but they have resisted. And right now they've faced probably two of the most the strongest armies in the world and strongest air forces in the world, and the regime continues to exist. And so, yes, I think that getting Iran to surrender will be virtually impossible, only if we are able, the United States, Israel, are able to have a regime change. But I don't see that Iran has, and the regime, talking about Pezeshkian, but others in the regime have even that choice, right? Because surrendering is the end of the regime. And obviously this is an existential fight for the maintenance of a certain vision of what Iran should be, which is, of course, the Islamic Republic of Iran since 1979.
Mr. Lima, Iran's reported attacks on the United Arab Emirates mark a significant escalation after the ceasefire. What message is Tehran sending with these strikes?
Right. I think that they are a significant and an important signal that Iran shows, even though they deny it. They deny attacking the UAE. They have done so. They have said so Tuesday. But we know that they have indeed targeted the UAE, and I think it's very, very significant. Why? Because the UAE is really the closest ally, if not of the US, certainly of Israel right now in the Middle East. So I think it's a form of penalizing the country, the state, for choosing that alignment. I think also this is an attempt to exploit a rift between the UAE and other Arab nations, which of course has become more prominent in recent days. Particularly evident Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, and Mohammed bin Zayed, the president of the UAE, really incorporating this feud that has instilled between the two countries and that has shown its effects in Yemen and also in Sudan. But I think that more significant than that is the decision made last week by the UAE to leave OPEC. So I think that right now the objective of Iran is, in a sense, penalize and show that those countries that will be first targeted are those that decide to align closer to Iran's, of course, strategic enemies. But also, I think that the decision to attack the UAE and not maybe, for example, attack Israel as a response to what to Operation Freedom was a strategic decision made by the UAE, because they knew that if they did decide to attack Israel would most certainly retaliate, and probably the US would retaliate as well. Whilst the attack on the UAE, as the recent days have shown, did not warrant the same level of response. So they are able basically to attack the UAE without suffering a direct consequence of that attack.
So do you see any realistic pathway toward a durable agreement between Washington and Tehran at this stage?
I think that depends what you define as a durable peace. If by a durable peace you mean that the main strategic differences between the United States and Iran that really are the source of this war will be all solved in an agreement that is able to align the two countries for the next decades, I think that is close to impossible. But and I think that it's surprising in the past few days, and as we speak, news have come out, basically I think reported via Pakistan, that parties are close to an agreement. And I think that there are a couple of issues here, or a couple of points that are important to highlight. First is the fact that Iran has agreed, let's see to what extent, if that is true, but apparently Iran has agreed to halt the nuclear enrichment for a given period. Some reports talk about 15 years, maybe 12 years, but that would be a difference. And that's important for the United States, because the United States can claim that they were able to take something from Iran then that was not present in the JCPOA, the big Iran-US deal, nuclear deal that was signed during the Obama administration, and that President Trump so vehemently criticized during his first term and until today. If I can answer your question, I think that a permanent peaceful deal between the two countries, very unlikely, something that the two countries can take home, perhaps present both of them as a victory for each side, and that is able to stabilize a ceasefire at least for the following months. Yes, I think that that is possible in the coming days, coming weeks, coming months.
Francisco Lima, political analyst, joining us from Lisbon. Thank you for your insights. We appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Welcome back to Anewz, and now we turn to our regional stories. Regional cooperation on agriculture and food security has taken center stage in Baku as ministers and officials gather for Caspian Agro 2026. The talks come amid growing pressure from climate change and economic uncertainty. Our correspondent Abu Hayat Jafarova has more.
An international conference dedicated to agricultural cooperation and food security was held on Wednesday within the framework of Caspian Agro 2026 at the Baku Expo Center. The event brought together agriculture ministers and officials from Azerbaijan, Turkey, Uzbekistan and Georgia to discuss regional approaches to food security amid climate, economic and security challenges. Speaking during the panel session, Majnun Mammadov stated that nearly 35% of the employment in Azerbaijan is linked to the agricultural sector. He emphasized the importance of improving water management, modernizing irrigation systems and expanding reservoir infrastructure across the country. According to the minister, currently 10 to 15% of irrigation systems in Azerbaijan meet modern standards, while the government aims to increase this figure to 20 and 30% in the coming years. Special attention during the discussions was also devoted to sustainable agricultural development and the creation of green zones in Karabakh region. The participants also emphasized the growing impact of climate change on agriculture and food security, highlighting the importance of regional cooperation, experience sharing, innovation and sustainable agricultural development. Caspian Agro Week, featuring more than 400 companies from 45 countries, will continue through May 8. Abu Hayat Jafarova, Elkin Mektev, Anewz.
In Baku, the 5th Agro-Business Development Forum has brought together local and international stakeholders to discuss the future of the agricultural sector. The discussions focused on food security and sustainable development within Azerbaijan's agri-food system.
The 5th Agro-Business Development Forum has been held in Baku as part of the Caspian Agro Week, bringing together officials, international partners and industry experts. Discussions focused on food security, sustainable development and ways to strengthen Azerbaijan's agri-food system.
The forum, organised with the support of international partners, serves as a platform to discuss strategic approaches to strengthening national agri-food systems. Key topics included improving productivity, ensuring efficient use of resources, and promoting climate-resilient agriculture. Speakers emphasised the importance of innovation and digital transformation in modernising the agricultural sector, noting that Azerbaijan is actively expanding its cooperation with international partners, including the Asian Development Bank and FAO, to boost competitiveness and accelerate sector development.
I highlight actually the 3 key words, which is also resounding for ADB's partnership with Azerbaijan for the agriculture sector. One is innovation. The second one is competitiveness. The third one is digitalization. And in particular, I will say actually Azerbaijan has been leading on all these 3 key aspects for the agriculture sector and transforming the overall agri-food system in the country. I'm sure there's also good practice we can bring into Azerbaijan.
Alongside technological progress, inclusivity and social impact were also in focus, particularly the role of women in agriculture and rural development.
For us at FAO, it's really an important time for us to reflect on the critical role of women in agriculture and in food systems. And it's a role which is often undervalued, actually. So this year, it's an opportunity for us to really consider the barriers that women face in agriculture and to consider ways for those barriers to be removed. Because once they're removed, it results in increased tangible results for communities as a whole. And these are results in terms of increased productivity, better nutrition, stronger resilience.
The forum also featured panel discussions and roundtables, bringing together stakeholders to exchange ideas and best practices.
The second day of Saha Expo 2026 is underway in Istanbul, showcasing the latest innovations in Turkish defense and aerospace. With $8 billion in new contracts expected, the event highlights Turkey's growing self-sufficiency and global export reach. Nuray Mustafa has more.
The second day of the Saha Expo 2026 exhibition held in Istanbul continues with events and presentation in the fields of defense, aviation and space. The exhibition is attracting significant international interest. According to official information, Turkey expects approximately $8 billion worth of the contracts to be signed at the event. The country currently exports more than 230 products to 185 countries. The Saha Expo has grown considerably since 2018. At that time, there were 180 companies, whereas today the event is much larger. This year, around 200 delegations are participating. The exhibition is organized according to the Green Corridor principle. Major companies are positioned in central areas while their partner firms are located around them. Saha Istanbul has more than 1,300 members. The organization plays an important role in strengthening industrial cooperation. Over the past 20 years, local production in Turkey has increased significantly, exceeding 80%. The country now manufactures products across land, air, naval and space sectors. Turkey produces both major platforms and their components, exporting them abroad. Last year, export reached $10.5 billion.
%80'den fazla dışarıya bağımlı bir
We have transitioned from a defense industry that was over 80% dependent on foreign sources to one that today possesses more than 80% domestic and national capabilities. We are speaking of a sector with a turnover exceeding $20 billion, which as of last year realized $10.5 billion in exports. We are currently the world's 11th largest exporter, and we hope to rank among the top 10 in the short term. While the defense industry is undoubtedly vital for security, it is equally critical for an independent foreign policy. This sector contributes significantly to Turkey's overall independence, as a country cannot maintain an independent foreign policy without a self-sufficient defense industry.
The exhibition is also marked by several new innovations. The Uran 105mm self-propelled howitzer was presented for the first time. The system has been developed based on the engineering experience gained from the Boran howitzer. Boran system was previously used by the Turkish armed forces and was exported to Bangladesh in 2024. This marked Turkey's first ever howitzer export. The Uran system is more mobile and faster. It operates on a 4x4 platform, has a firing range of 18 km and is capable of firing 12 rounds per minute. There are the latest updates from the exhibition so far. Saha Expo 2026 continues on its second day with the new technologies, new contracts and expanding international cooperation. Nuray Mustafa, Anewz Hacıyev for Anewz, Istanbul, Turkey.
Turkey is reaffirming its commitment to lasting stability in the South Caucasus. Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz told journalists that Azerbaijan and Armenia have already made significant progress toward a final settlement, bringing the region closer to a diplomatic breakthrough.
We want to see peace in the South Caucasus. Armenia and Azerbaijan have made very significant progress in this regard, and we believe that peace is now within reach. With the establishment of this peace, the South Caucasus, a region of immense strategic importance, will play a new and distinct role on both the regional and global stage. In particular, the development of the Middle Corridor and the opening of the Zangezur Corridor will bring both enhanced security and greater prosperity to the entire region.
Parallel to these diplomatic efforts, the defense partnership between Ankara and Baku is reaching new heights. Speaking exclusively to Anewz, Haluk Görgün, president of the Turkish Defense Industry Agency, detailed the expanding scope of their cooperation, highlighting a shift toward joint investments and long-term institutional growth.
We have new topics of discussion with Azerbaijan every day. We were joined at this exhibition by both the Minister of Defense Industry and the Deputy Defense Minister. Following the minister's attendance at yesterday's opening ceremony, we held further high-level talks with the Deputy Defense Minister today. Our cooperation covers a vast range of issues, from modern security measures to the latest defense innovations. Our discussions focus on mutual development, joint investments, and the establishment of institutional processes between our two nations.
The Asian Development Bank's annual meeting in Samarkand has concluded with a new renewable energy agreement for Uzbekistan and discussions on regional economic resilience and supply chains.
The final day of the Asian Development Bank's 59th annual meeting in Samarkand focused on clean energy investment, economic resilience and future regional cooperation. One of the key developments was the signing of a $116 million financing agreement between the Asian Development Bank and Nakwa Power to support the construction of the 300-megawatt Bash-2 wind power project in Uzbekistan's Bukhara region. The project will include 39 wind turbines, new transmission infrastructure and a substation connected to the national grid. According to the ADB, the initiative will strengthen Uzbekistan's renewable energy capacity, improve energy security and support the country's low-carbon transition. The bank also noted that its renewable energy projects in Uzbekistan now exceed 2 gigawatts in total supported capacity.
This project is quite critical to support Uzbekistan's global climate change commitments as well as its green transition agenda. Furthermore, this project creates jobs, both directly in terms of companies and workers employed on the site, but also indirectly because it provides additional supply, reliable supply of power to households, businesses, SMEs, so it's quite important.
Additionally, the Asian Development Bank presented its Asian Development Policy Report 2026, focused on global value chains and inclusive economic development. The report highlighted that stronger regional integration has helped economies across Asia and the Pacific generate growth, create jobs and reduce poverty over the past decades. At the same time, the bank warned that geopolitical tensions and supply chain disruptions continue to create new economic risks for developing economies. ADB officials stressed the importance of improving infrastructure, logistics and competitiveness to help countries better integrate into global trade and production networks. The meeting concluded with an official handover ceremony announcing that the 60th annual meeting of the Asian Development Bank will be hosted in Aichi, Nagoya, Japan from 2nd to 5th May 2027. It is Ivri Rajab reporting from Samarkand, Uzbekistan, Anewz.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Turkey-Armenia normalization and the restoration of the historic Anewz Bridge, marking a turning point in bilateral relations. See you shortly. Welcome back to Anewz. We continue with a significant development in the long normalization process between Turkey and Armenia. Turkey's Special Envoy for Normalization, retired Ambassador Serdar Kılıç, has described a recent visit by Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz to Yerevan as a turning point in bilateral relations. During the visit, Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz met Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and attended the signing of a protocol to restore the historic Anewz Bridge, an 11th century structure located along the ancient Silk Road, symbolically linking the two countries across both history and geography. The talks in Yerevan come amid a broader diplomatic thaw that began in early 2022, when both countries appointed special envoys and launched a structured dialogue process. Since then, we have seen incremental but notable steps. Limited air connectivity has resumed. Reciprocal scholarship programs have been introduced, and technical working groups have been established on railway rehabilitation projects, such as the Kars-Gümri line. To discuss what this turning point really means, I'm joined by Bekir İlhan from the Turkey Research Foundation, speaking to us from Ankara. Mr. İlhan, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. İlhan, Ambassador Kılıç called the Yılmaz visit a turning point. In your assessment, does this reflect a real structural shift or mainly diplomatic symbolism?
Yeah, I would say it reflects, elements of both, political shift and, for sure, symbolism, I would say. And also, I would call it as a turning point as well, because, as far as I know, it's the first, high-level visit, or it's the highest-level visit, since 2008. And the Turkish Vice President, Mr. Cevdet Yılmaz, visited Yerevan. And both countries, Turkey and Armenia, signed a memorandum of understanding. And yes, there is a reconciliation process between Armenia and Turkey in recent years, and it's not the first normalization process. By the way, we have seen different normalization process in previous years, but they failed. But for this one, I would say the steps and the political will is strong, I would say, because both countries just perform confidence building measures, and they just establish political trust through dialogue and as such high level visits, I would say. Just don't forget that Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan visited Turkey many times in recent years, and it's a very important attitude, I would say, as well. And like I said, it's both symbolically important and politically important visits on the Turkey's side. And I think that in the short term, of course, there will be no major and radical development between two countries, but I do expect a kind of incremental and gradual, developments regarding the relations between Armenia and Turkey, I would say, because both countries need such a cooperation. By the way, both countries need, economic cooperation, political cooperation, especially after the liberation of Karabakh. Both countries, Armenia and Turkey, decided to talk without preconditions. And I would say this time, I would say a little bit optimistic, regarding the future of both countries.
Mr. İlhan, what does the Anewz Bridge restoration symbolize in the broader context of Turkey-Armenia reconciliation? And to what extent can heritage and infrastructure projects actually drive political normalization?
Yeah, I would say the reverse is the true, because, the political normalization, I would say, drives such, symbolic movements, I would say, not the vice versa, I would say, because first there is political will, first there is political, establishment of relations, and then you can see such, attitudes of goodwill, such attitudes of, genuine cooperation, historic and, symbolic cooperation. Because without a political support, or without political will, I would say such historic or transformative steps cannot be taken easily. And I would say since the political will from the both sides, both in Armenia and Turkey, decided to start a normalization process in 2022, we have seen many, 2022, yes, we have seen many, major steps, towards the deepen, economic cooperation and political cooperation as well. And I would say, of course, the Anewz Bridge is a very important bridge. It's located at the very border of the two countries, and for sure, as a bridge, it just connects geography, it just connects, people. And I would say, for the, with this bridge, and I would say with this restoration project, I would say there will be more cooperation and people-to-people cooperation. I would say, of course, political cooperation is very important, but people-to-people cooperation would be another major steps toward, developing the relations between Armenia and Turkey, I would say.
So Turkey-Armenia air connectivity has resumed and is reportedly expanding. How important is aviation in changing public perception between the two societies?
Yeah, like I said, people to people or the society cooperation is very important, and as you said, the air connectivity between the two countries at this point is very important, bridging the economic and political aspects of two societies. Without air connectivity or without flights, you cannot cooperate economically. Both societies, both people needs to visit each other. Both businessmen, political leaders should visit each other. At this point, for sure, the air connectivity is a major, development, I would say, and I think it's it's going beyond being symbolic, I would say, because it's a major and concrete, sign of cooperation between two countries. And I would say, just to make more concrete, to relations, I would say, such, railways projects, air-to-air connectivity and other, logistical problems should be solved. And I would say for these problems to be solved, both sides need political will first, then society relations. After that, I would say the technical and logistic problems could be solved easily. And at this point, I would say air connectivity and flights between two countries, will of course, deepen the relations. And I would say the political aspects at this point will evolve to economic aspects between two countries, because without railways or without flights, you cannot exchange economies. And that's why I think that the air connectivity between two countries is very important, and it should, further the relations forward, I would say.
So what role do external actors such as Russia, the EU and the United States play in either facilitating or constraining the normalization?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a little bit skeptical about it, the role of foreign actors, regarding the Armenia and Turkey relations, because, of course, some political actors, some external actors, do not want such a normalization process between Armenia and Turkey. But on the other hand, of course, as you said, some other actors may like to, see cooperation between Turkey and Armenia. But I think that the role of foreign actors, should be minimized in such process, because both Turkey and Armenia, both countries, have the will and have the capacity to develop such a cooperation. Of course, other countries like Azerbaijan, is an important actor. I do not see Azerbaijan as an external actor at this point. But, such regional countries, Georgia, Azerbaijan, of course, these two countries can contribute to the normalization process. But regarding the great powers like, the European Union powers, the United States and Russia, I would say, I think their role should be minimized at this point, because, as I said, both Turkey and Armenia, has the will and the capacity to develop such relations, and they do not need a facilitator country. They do not need a moderator country, other than Georgia and Azerbaijan, I would say. And that's why I'm a little bit skeptical about the role of external actors. And I believe that in South Caucasia, Georgia, Turkey, Armenia and Azerbaijan, can start a very good economic and political normalization process, and political and economic prosperity, can be, achieved, through dialogue and diplomacy, for sure. And that's why I believe that I would just summarize this as like this, South Caucasia is just for South Caucasian countries, and these countries, the regional countries, can establish political and economic developments together.
Bekir İlhan, thank you very much for talking to Anewz and for sharing your insights with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. This concludes our news update for the hour. Thank you for being with us, and stay tuned to Anewz for more updates.